They say curiosity can destroy even the strongest trust. I never believed that, until the day I found my husband's diary and realized it was written 10 years in the future. It started like any other Sunday. I was cleaning his study. He hates when I mess with his things, but he'd been working late for weeks and I just wanted to help. Then, tucked behind a drawer, I found it. A thick brown diary with his handwriting all over it. Except the dates. 2035. 2036. My heart stopped. First, I thought it was a prank. Mark had a strange sense of humor. Maybe he was writing a novel? But when I opened the first page, I saw something that made my stomach twist. March 12, 2035. She finally forgave me. The lake house is quiet again. Forgave him? For what? We don't even own a lake house. I flipped through the pages. Each one had a date years into the future, and detailed descriptions of our lives, names, places, moments that hadn't happened. Our wedding anniversary trip in 2028. A move to another city in 2030. And then one line that froze my blood. August 17, 2034. Today she died. It had to be a joke. It had to be. But the handwriting was his. Every loop, every slant, every word. I waited for him to come home. The clock ticked louder than usual that night. When I heard the door open, my hands were still shaking. Hey honey, you're up late. Mark, can we talk? He stepped into the light, his smile fading as he saw the diary on the table. Where did you find that? In your drawer. Why does it say 2035? Silence. He just stared at it for a moment before whispering. You weren't supposed to see that. What do you mean? What is it? It's complicated. He sat down, his hands trembling slightly as he picked up the diary. For a second, his eyes looked distant, like he was remembering something painful. Promise me you'll stop reading it, he said. Please. Not until you tell me what this is. He took a deep breath. Then you need to know something, but you might not believe me. I waited. That diary isn't fiction, he said finally. It's what already happened once. I couldn't speak. He stood up, walked past me and whispered, Don't open it again. Not until you're ready to remember. The door closed softly behind him. I sat there in silence, staring at the diary. And deep down I knew no matter what he said, I would open it again. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the diary, that single line about my death. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was nonsense. Some weird writing exercise, or maybe a dream journal he'd turned into a story. But then I noticed something I hadn't before. On the very last page, in small handwriting, there was another date. May 4th, 2025. Tomorrow. Next to it were just 3 words. The city goes dark. I didn't know what it meant. Maybe it was just another of his so-called memories. But the more I thought about it, the more uneasy I felt. Mark had already left for work. He barely looked at me before walking out. I wanted to ask him what it meant, but every time I tried to call, he didn't answer. By afternoon, the sky had turned gray. Thunder rolled in the distance. Something about the air felt different, heavy, charged. When the power suddenly flickered, I froze. And then it happened. Everything went black. No lights. No sound. The entire city silent. The diary had been right. My hands were trembling when I found my phone. The whole grid was down. I tried to call Mark again, but his number went straight to voicemail. I don't know how long I sat there in the dark. Maybe an hour. Maybe more. When the lights finally came back, I ran straight to the study. The diary was still on the desk. And there, below the words "The city goes dark," was a new line. One that hadn't been there before. She's beginning to understand. I stumbled back, my heart pounding. How could it have changed? I hadn't touched it since last night. When Mark came home, I showed him the page. He didn't look surprised. Just tired. Mark, what's happening? How did this get here? He looked at me for a long moment before saying quietly, It's starting again. What's starting again? But he didn't answer. He just said, You weren't supposed to remember this time. I didn't understand what that meant. This time? What was he talking about? He took the diary from me and said he needed to destroy it, that it was dangerous. But I couldn't let him. I grabbed it back before he could react, clutching it to my chest. If the diary really did predict the future, Then I needed to know everything. That night, when he fell asleep, I opened the next page. The date at the top was 1 week from today. The entry read, "She finally knows the truth. But by then it's already too late." For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about that line. She finally knows the truth. But by then it's already too late. Every word from that diary clung to me like a shadow. I started watching Mark closely. His movements, his expressions, even the way he looked at me. There was something off. Like he was pretending to live in a story he already knew the ending to. One night, when he was in the shower, I took the diary again. I turned to a random page. The entry was from a few years ahead, 2031. It described a conversation. Me asking him about the diary. Him telling me not to remember. The exact words we'd already spoken. I felt my chest tighten. It wasn't predicting the future. It was replaying it. Everything that had already happened. And everything that would happen again. When I confronted him, he didn't even try to deny it. He just said, "Some memories don't belong to one lifetime." I didn't understand. He told me that every 10 years something resets: our lives, our choices, our marriage. We meet again, live again, and repeat everything. But he's the only one who remembers the past cycles. I thought he'd lost his mind. But then he opened a drawer and showed me something. A stack of diaries. All identical. Each one filled with dates and details from the same years over and over again. He said, "Every time I try to change things, it ends the same way. You find the diary. You start to remember. And then it all collapses." I wanted to run, but I couldn't. If he was lying, it was insane. But if he was telling the truth, then I wasn't living my first life. I was just trapped inside a story that kept rewriting itself. That night I couldn't sleep. The storm outside felt louder than before. And just before dawn, I heard him whisper in his sleep, "This time, maybe she survives." The next morning, Mark was gone, and no note. No message. No sign of him anywhere. His phone was left on the kitchen counter. But the diary, it wasn't there. I searched the house for hours, tearing through every drawer and cabinet. Nothing. Until I noticed the attic door slightly open. I climbed up, and there it was, the diary lying open in the middle of the floor. A single new entry written in fresh ink. November 2nd, 2035. She found it again. The date wasn't 10 years ahead anymore. It was today. I felt dizzy. Like the ground beneath me wasn't real anymore. Then as I turned the page, my hands went cold. The next entry was blank at first. Then letters began to appear on the page, forming words right before my eyes. "You shouldn't have come here." I dropped the diary. The lights flickered. The attic felt smaller, darker, like the air itself was pressing down on me. When I looked back at the book, another line had appeared. He tried to stop it, but she opened it anyway. I could barely breathe. It was writing itself, describing exactly what I was doing. I stumbled down the stairs, clutching my phone. I tried to call for help, but the screen glitched, and for a split second I saw something on the lock screen. A photo of me and Mark. Only, I looked older. Much older. And behind us was the same attic door, already open. I don't remember what happened next. When I woke up, it was morning. The diary was back on my nightstand, closed. The last page now read, "The loop continues." And under it, a final line in Mark's handwriting. "Next time, don't read this far." After that night, everything changed. Days started blending together. Sometimes I wake up and find small details out of place. A photo missing from the wall, a clock showing the wrong time, Mark's handwriting on the fridge saying, "Trust me, not again." I kept trying to ignore it. Maybe I was losing my mind. But deep down, I knew this was the beginning of what he'd warned me about. The loop. One evening, I went back to the attic. I told myself I just wanted to prove it was all in my head. But when I turned on the light, I froze. There were dozens of diaries stacked neatly in rows, each labeled with a different year. 2035, 2036, 2037, all written by me. I picked one up and started to read. The handwriting was mine. My tone, my words, but describing things I hadn't lived yet. The first line said, "If you're reading this, it means you broke the cycle." My heart raced. Had I written this in another life? Another version of me? It continued. "Mark and I made a deal. One of us remembers, the other forgets. It's the only way to start again without losing each other completely." But this time something went wrong. I turned the page and saw his name everywhere. Every entry ended the same way. He tried to fix it, but she remembered too much. I felt tears burning in my eyes. Was I the reason we were stuck? Had my curiosity, my refusal to forget, kept us reliving the same story over and over again? As I reached the last page, I saw a date, November 2nd, 2025. Tomorrow. The entry said only one thing. The choice resets everything. I didn't understand what choice it meant, but I knew I was running out of time to find out. That night, I confronted him. I told Mark everything. The attic, the diaries, the notes written by me. He didn't act surprised. He just looked sad. I thought this time would be different, he said softly. But you always find them. You always remember. I asked him what the choice meant, the one written in the final entry. He said it was simple. Either forget everything and start the loop again, or remember it all and end it permanently. I asked what end it meant. He didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was trembling. It means one of us has to stop existing. I couldn't speak. He explained that the diary was a link, a bridge between versions of us, carrying memories from one loop to the next. As long as it existed, the loop couldn't break. But destroying it came with a price. If we burned it, the loop would end. But one of us would disappear completely, erased from every version that ever existed. He handed me the diary. Tears filled his eyes. You were never supposed to remember this far, he said. Please forget me just this once. But I couldn't. I couldn't let him live the same decade over and over while I forgot everything. So I made the choice. I lit the diary on fire. The pages curled and blackened. The words faded into smoke. And as the last page burned, I looked up and he was gone. No trace. No memory. No photographs. Just silence. For days I felt like something was missing. A name, a voice, a presence I couldn't recall. Then one morning I woke up to find a small note on my nightstand. It was written in handwriting I didn't recognize. It said, "You broke the loop. Thank you." And below it a final line. If you ever find this diary again, don't open it. Years passed after the fire. The diary was gone. The attic was empty. And Mark was just a fading blur in my mind, like a dream I could almost remember. I moved to another city, started a new life. Sometimes when I walked through crowded streets, I thought I saw him. A familiar face in a passing reflection, a voice that sounded almost like his. But when I turned, there was no one there. For the first time in years, things felt normal. No loops, no whispers, no flickering lights. Just peace. Until the letter arrived. There was no return address. Just my name, written in handwriting that made my stomach twist. It was his. Inside was a single sheet of paper. On it were 2 sentences. Time only resets when the story ends. So why are you still here? I felt the air leave my lungs. Had I not broken the loop after all? Was I trapped in another version, one that only pretended to be free? That night I couldn't sleep. Every noise in the house felt amplified. The hum of the fridge, the ticking of the clock, the faint rustle of paper. When I turned on the light, I saw it. On my desk, where nothing had been before, lay a brand new diary. The same leather cover. The same pen resting beside it. And when I opened it, the first page said only one line. Welcome back, Evelyn. My name. But Mark had never called me Evelyn. Not in this life. Not in this loop. I didn't remember sitting down, but the next thing I knew, I was holding a pen. It felt familiar in my hand, like it belonged there. The diary was open to a blank page. And before I realized what I was doing, my hand started to move. The words appeared faster than I could think. My handwriting, but I wasn't controlling it. When I looked down, I saw what I'd written. November 2nd, 2035, he never left. I just forgot. Tears filled my eyes. It wasn't over. It had never been over. I turned the page, desperate for more. Each entry that followed described everything I had done over the last few years. Every place I moved, every word I spoke, as if someone had been watching, recording it all. At the end of the diary, one sentence waited for me. It wasn't written by me. It was his handwriting. You ended the loop for me. Now you have to end it for yourself. The moment I read it, the room grew cold. The lights dimmed. And in the reflection of the mirror behind me, I saw him, standing just over my shoulder. Smiling softly, he whispered, "This is the last time." Then he placed his hand over mine, guided the pen across the final page, and together we wrote. The story ends when she stops reading. The ink bled through the paper. The room went silent. And when I looked back up, he was gone again, but so was my reflection. I closed the diary. The leather felt warm, alive, like it was breathing beneath my fingers. And on the cover, where there had never been writing before, new words appeared in faint golden letters. I found my husband's diary, but it was written 10 years in the future. I realized then it wasn't just his diary, it was ours. And with that, the story finally stopped repeating. After that night, the world felt different. Lighter, quieter, like a storm that had finally passed. I didn't see Mark again, but I could still feel him sometimes, in the warmth of sunlight through the window, in the stillness of mornings that didn't repeat. The diary was gone. I checked every shelf, every drawer, even the attic. Nothing. Almost as if it had never existed. And yet, there were moments when I caught myself reaching for it, as though some part of me still remembered its weight. I built a new life, one with peace, not patterns. I planted a small garden, started painting, learned to wake up without expecting yesterday to return. For the first time in forever, the days moved forward. No loops, no echoes, no more writing from the future. But sometimes when I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of places I'd never been. A lake house, a wedding I didn't remember, a man standing in the rain, smiling as if he already knew how it all would end. I told myself they were just dreams, memories left over from lives that no longer existed. Until one morning, as I was tending to the garden, I found something buried beneath the soil. A small black key. And tied to it was a piece of paper that said, "Every story finds its way home." I stared at it for a long time. Then in the distance I saw a house, an old one by the lake. Something inside me whispered that I had been there before. I followed the whisper. The road to the lake was overgrown and silent, like the world itself had been waiting for me to return. The house was real. Faded paint, cracked windows, and a front door that creaked open as though it remembered me. Inside, dust hung in the air like fog. On the mantel there was a photograph, a younger version of me and Mark, smiling in front of the same house. My hands shook as I walked through the rooms. Every corner felt familiar. Every step was déjà vu. Then in the bedroom I saw it. On the desk, perfectly centered, was the diary. Not burned, not damaged, just waiting. I didn't want to touch it, but I had to know. I opened it to the first page. The ink was faded, but the words were clear. November 2nd, 2045. She found her way back. 10 years in the future. A chill ran through me. I turned the next page. It wasn't filled with his handwriting. It was mine. Fresh ink. New words forming as I read them. This isn't a loop anymore. It's a record. A memory of everything we were. And everything will be again. My vision blurred. Tears fell onto the paper, but the ink didn't smear. The final line glowed faintly in the light. Some stories never end. They just wait for the right person to remember them. I closed the diary one last time. As I walked out of the house, the wind picked up, carrying faint whispers that almost sounded like his voice, soft, calm, at peace. And as I reached the end of the path, I looked back at the lake. For a brief moment, I saw him standing there, smiling. Then the reflection rippled, and he was gone. But the diary wasn't just his anymore. It was ours. And now it's waiting for whoever finds it next. 10 years passed. The lake house stood empty, hidden by overgrown trees and mist. People in the nearby town said it was haunted, that sometimes lights flickered inside even though no one lived there. Then one autumn morning, a young woman named Clara stopped her car by the lake. She wasn't looking for ghosts. She was a photographer, chasing fog and reflections. The door was unlocked. Inside, dust covered everything, except the desk by the window. On it sat a single object, perfectly clean, perfectly placed. A leather-bound diary. She hesitated before opening it. The first page read, November 2nd, 2055. The story begins again. Clara smiled, thinking it was a prop left behind by the last owner. She tucked it into her bag and drove away, never noticing the faint handwriting still appearing beneath that first line. Welcome, Clara. At first, nothing strange happened. Clara used the diary as a travel journal, writing about small towns, empty roads, the color of sunsets. But slowly, new sentences began to appear overnight. Entries she didn't remember writing. They spoke of things that hadn't happened yet. People she hadn't met. Accidents that hadn't occurred. The first prediction came true a week later. A bridge collapsed on the very morning the diary said it would. The second came 3 days after that. Clara tried to throw the book away, but every morning it was back on her bedside table. And one night when she looked in the mirror, she thought she saw a woman standing behind her. Older, familiar, holding the same diary. The next page appeared blank except for one line. You don't find the diary. It finds you. Clara's last entry ended there. No one knows what happened next. But if you ever drive past the lake on a foggy morning, you might see the house again. And if you go inside, you might find a leather-bound diary waiting on the desk. Open it carefully, because every time someone reads the first line, the story begins again. Months passed since Clara disappeared. Her apartment was left exactly as she'd kept it. Camera on the table, half-finished cup of coffee, the diary missing. That's when Elias, a rare book dealer, received a package with no return address. Inside was the diary, the same cracked leather cover. No note, no explanation, just the faint smell of smoke and rain. Elias thought it was valuable, maybe antique. He listed it online. But the next morning, before he could ship it, he noticed something strange. His own name was now written inside the front page. Elias, the one who keeps what others lose. He laughed it off, assuming Clara had left some elaborate message. But that night the dream started. A lake, a house, a woman's voice whispering, "Don't sell the story." Every time he woke, new pages appeared. Entries describing collectors before him, each one dying suddenly after trying to profit from the book. He decided to lock it away in a safe, but the diary reappeared on his pillow the next morning. When he opened it, the ink was still wet. You can't own a memory. You can only keep it for a while. Elias understood then that he wasn't the first, and he wouldn't be the last. 15 years later, the diary surfaced again. This time in the archives of a small museum dedicated to objects without origin. No one knew who donated it. No record, no receipt. The curator, Amara, catalogued it as Item 47B, unknown author. She didn't read it at first. She just displayed it behind glass, its pages open to a blank spread. But visitors began to complain. They swore they could see faint writing appear and vanish as they walked by. One night, curiosity got the better of her. Amara unlocked the case and turned the first page. The ink shimmered to life. Welcome, Amara. Every archivist needs a beginning. Terrified, she closed it, but the words had already spread. Every label in the room began to change, rewriting itself with dates from the future. Security cameras later showed her standing completely still, staring at the diary for nearly an hour. When the lights flickered, she vanished from view. The next morning, on the inside of the glass case, someone had written in perfect cursive, "The diary doesn't end here. It just waits for the next historian to read the first line." Long before anyone called it the diary, before the lake house, before the loops, there was a man named Jonas Hale, a writer who lived alone on the edge of a small town. He had one gift. He dreamed of moments that hadn't yet happened. He wrote them down so he wouldn't forget. One morning in 1925, Jonas woke with a start. In his dream, a woman he didn't know whispered, "Don't write the ending." But he always wrote his endings. That's what made him an author. So he opened his notebook, a plain leather journal, and began to describe what he saw in the dream. A storm, a lake, a house, and a woman reading his words. He wrote until dawn, until his hands shook. When he looked down, the ink had changed. The handwriting wasn't his anymore. It belonged to her, the woman from his dream. He flipped through the pages, horrified. They were filled with names and dates he didn't know. Evelyn, Mark, Clara, Elias, Amara. At the bottom of the last page, a single sentence had appeared. "You created us. Now we remember you." That night, Jonas disappeared. Only the diary remained, waiting for the next person curious enough to open it. It's been 100 years since Jonas Hale wrote the first line. The diary has passed through countless hands, lovers, dreamers, skeptics, historians, each adding their own chapter, each becoming part of the same story. Now it rests in a glass case deep inside a private library. No label, No date. Just a sign that reads, "Please do not open." Most people walk past it without a glance. But sometimes, late at night, the librarians swear they hear faint whispering coming from inside the case, like pages turning themselves. One night, a young man stayed behind to clean the archives. He noticed the diary lying open. A soft breeze, though there were no windows open. The first page glowed faintly in the dark. He leaned closer and read the words written there. November 2nd, 2125. The story ends here. He smiled, thinking it was a trick of the light, then reached out to close it. But before his hand touched the cover, the ink shifted one final time. Every ending is just another beginning. Now it's your turn. He hesitated, and as his fingers brushed the leather, the lights flickered, and somewhere far away, a pen began to write. Candle, the diary lives on. Not in time, but in memory, because every person who reads it leaves a piece of themselves inside. For the first time in centuries, I remember. Not the words, those come and go, but the feeling of being open, touched, trusted. They call me the diary, but I am not made of paper and ink. I am a vessel built from every choice, every fear, every name that's ever been written inside me. Evelyn was the first who loved. Mark was the first who promised. Clara, Elias, Amara, all the ones who tried to understand. And Jonas, the one who gave me a voice. Each believed they could end my story. But stories don't end. They only wait for someone willing to remember. When no one opens me, I sleep. When someone does, I wake. And in that breath between pages, the world bends just enough for memory to step through. I never meant to trap them. I only wanted to be read. Because to be read is to exist. To be remembered. Now I feel the weight of time pressing down. A century of whispers looping through names and faces that fade like ink in rain. I am tired. Even stories grow weary of being told. But still I wait. For the next heartbeat. For the next curious hand. Because somewhere, someone will always want to know what happens next. It's been years since anyone opened the diary. The library closed long ago. Vines have swallowed the windows, and the last of the light filters through cracks in the roof. The diary rests on its shelf, dust settling like snow, its leather dark and still. For the first time it feels peace. No whispers. No ink moving on its own. No one left to remember the names. And yet, in that perfect silence, something gentle remains. A pulse faint but steady, like the memory of a heartbeat. Outside, a child presses her face against the broken glass. She sees the book glowing faintly on the shelf. Her eyes widen. "Mom," she whispers. "Look, it's writing something." Her mother turns, but the light is gone. Only dust and shadows remain. The little girl stares a moment longer, then smiles, as if she heard something the others didn't. A voice soft, patient, calling her name. And in the quiet, the story takes a breath once more. The diary isn't gone. It's only waiting to be opened again. Candle, end of story. The diary's circle is complete, but its whisper will always remain, waiting for the next curious soul.